Good evening from New York. Hey, how about that Bobby Jindal speech, huh? Our fifth story in the countdown. Now that he's given a Republican response slammed by apparently all but one Republican, what's he going to do now? He's going to Disney World. Seriously, taking the family to Orlando. At least that's his story. And unfortunately, his story last night, the linchpin anecdote, apparently not true. Meet the Republican Party's new best hope to defeat President Obama in 2012. Sorry, Governor Palin. The 37-year-old governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal, adopting the mantle of something last night. He was already out on something of a limb as a Republican, seeming to cite the Bush administration's response to Hurricane Katrina as the reason not to trust President Obama on the economy now. But what he said next was more curious still. The governor telling a story about a purported visit to the office of Harry Lee, then the sheriff of Jefferson Parish, in the storm's immediate aftermath.
During Katrina, I visited Sheriff Harry Lee, a Democrat and a good friend of mine. He told me that he put out a call for volunteers to come with their boats to rescue people who were trapped on their rooftops by the floodwaters. The boats were all lined up and ready to go. And then some bureaucrat showed up and told them they couldn't go out in the water unless they had proof of insurance and registration. And I told him, Sheriff, that's ridiculous. Before I knew it, he was yelling on the phone, Congressman Jindal is here, and he says you can come and arrest him too. Harry just told those boaters, ignore the bureaucrats and go start rescuing people.
One small problem, every public account placing then Congressman Jindal right after the storm, not in Jefferson Parish, but about 75 miles away in Baton Rouge. When he did tour the immediate disaster area, he did so by air, flying over it. And in May 2008, Mr. Jindal telling a story of having talked with the sheriff about bureaucracy and boats, but no mention of having done so in person. Conveniently, there is no way to confirm the account with Sheriff Harry Lee. He died in October 2007. Another problem for Governor Jindal, widespread criticism of his speech last night from conservatives, including New York Times columnist David Brooks, who called the substance of Jindal's government is the problem argument a disaster for the Republican Party.
It's just a disaster for the Republican Party. The country is in a panic now. They may not like the way the Democrats have passed the stimulus bill, but the idea that that government is going to have no role, the federal government has no role in this, that in a moment when only the federal government is big enough to actually do stuff, to just ignore all that and just say government's a problem, corruption, earmarks, wasteful spending, it's just a form of nihilism.
Mr. Brooks not alone. Britt Hume, Charles Krauthammer, Juan Williams, Jim Garrity of the National Review, just a few of the many on the right voicing their disapproval. Comedian Rush Limbaugh, who has referred to Jindal as the next Ronald Reagan. However, he all but threatened all of them for going after Jindal.
But the people on our side are really making a mistake if they go after Bobby Jindal on the basis of style. Because if you think, people on our side, I'm talking to you, those of you who think Jindal was horrible, you think, in fact, I don't want to hear from you ever again. If you think that Bobby Jindal was bad and what he said was wrong or not said well, because, folks, style is not going to take our country back. Solid conservatism, articulated in a way that's inspiring and understanding, is what's going to take the country back.
Well, now that Mr. Limbaugh has reduced the conservative movement to one guy, time now to call in our own political analyst, Richard Wolff. Good evening, Richard.
Good evening, Keith.
Did Mr. Limbaugh conflate there, style and substance? Because David Brooks was definitely going after the substance of Jindal's remark, the premise of his article. Others went after his style. But Limbaugh appeared to be defending both of these things when he said, if you think that Bobby Jindal was bad or what he said was wrong or not said well.
Well, Keith, I think I can understand where Bobby Jindal's coming from. You see, my father, like his and like the President of the United States, came from a distant land, far away, across the seas, a continent where we have supermarkets but no goods in the aisles. And he took me down the aisle one day and he said, son, if you ever use one of these stories, it means you're all out of stories. This wasn't just about substance. It wasn't just about style, even though the spiritual leader of the movement says it was just style. Look, the key story here, apart from the impoverished state that his father grew up in, the key story was about a government official, a sheriff, whose salary is paid for by the public purse, arguing with bureaucrats from a federal government run by a Republican president. None of it makes sense.
There was, however, the element of style, which is part of politics, and one criticism that was so prevalent that it now has its own Facebook group is titled "Bobby Jindal is Kenneth the Page," and there's more than 2,800 members here. Is that, I mean, seriously bad news for somebody who might be hoping to look presidential, to cultivate some sort of measure of gravitas?
Can a page run for president? Look, gravitas and is something you need if you're desperate. And I think actually the problem here for Bobby Jindal was that he was trying too hard to find the gravitas. The whole walk around the corner that Chris Matthews loved so much, the striped tie, the red and white striped tie, the folksy stories, the father from overseas. Hell, he even talked about the American scope, the narrative of history, as if he was Barack Obama, only the comparisons were just awful. And I guess you could have some sympathy and say, well, he didn't have a cheering crowd in front of him, but cheering or not, this was a disaster.
If you are planning out Republican strategy for the presidential election of 2012, or even just contemplating it, where's the Republican bench between what happened to Governor Jindal last night and the, not self-destruction of Governor Palin? She seems indestructible, but she certainly doesn't seem as formidable as she would have 8 months ago.
Yeah, look, they're all trying too hard. At some point, you just have to take stock and say, what do we stand for, as opposed to saying, who's going to be the next candidate? The election is too far away. This was too personal a pitch for Jindal, saying instead of responding to the policies, trying to make a pitch for himself. Sarah Palin, of course, had her own wonderful TV moment or two. If you are not ready for prime time, and these people surely meet that definition, then you can actually ruin a career that had some promise and potential. I think Governor Jindal probably did have some potential. That's all gone.
Well, devil's advocate, though, on this. I mean, as recently as a Monday of this week, Governor Jindal got high marks in the wake of his appearance on Meet the Press. I mean, could that have been a bad night, a bad reading? Could he just have teleprompter disease, Richard?
No, I think it is more serious. You know, you can have one bad moment or two, but as Sarah Palin showed with Katie Couric and everybody else, if it's indelible, if people never forget it, if this is what you go down for as a national joke, then there's no way back.
MSNBC political analyst Richard Wolff on fire tonight, and himself a veritable huddled mass yearning to be free. Thank you, sir.
Please. Thank you.